Wilford Woodruff was the president of the LDS Temple in St. George, Utah, before becoming the fourth Mormon prophet. During his time as president of the St. George Temple, he claimed to have been visited by prominent deceased figures from American and world history, who asked him to do their temple work, including baptisms for the dead and endowments, so they could become members of the church and receive all the blessings of the celestial kingdom. Woodruff wrote in his journal about the founding fathers of the United States appearing to him, saying, "You have had the use of the endowment house for a number of years, and yet nothing has ever been done for us. We laid the foundation of the government you now enjoy, and we never apostatized from it, but we remain true to it, and were faithful to God." Woodruff asked John McAllister to baptize him for the dead on behalf of the signers of the Declaration of Independence. Also John Wesley, Christopher Columbus, and all of the presidents of the United States with the exception of three, Buchanan, Van Buren and Grant, saying, "And when their cause is just, somebody will do the work for them." Woodruff wrote in his journal. On the same day these ordinances were performed, President Woodruff recorded in his journal that he baptized Brother McAllister for 21, including General Washington and his forefathers, and all the presidents of the United States that were on my list, except Buchanan, Van Buren and Grant. Sister Lucy Bigelow Young went forth into the font and was baptized for Martha Washington and her family, and 70 of the eminent women of the world. There were baptized in all today 682. At the same time, a few of these deceased persons were ordained to the office of high priest in the church. These include George Washington, John Wesley, Benjamin Franklin, and Christopher Columbus. James G. Bleak, Woodruff's clerk, was present for the baptisms and ordinances, and wrote in his journal, "I was also present in the St. George Temple, and witnessed the appearance of the spirits of the signers, the spirits of the presidents, and also others, such as Martin Luther and John Wesley, who came to Wilford Woodruff and demanded that their baptism and endowments be done. Wilford Woodruff was baptized for all of them, while I and brothers John McAllister and David H. Cannon, who were witnesses to the request, were endowed for them. These men laid the foundation of this American government, and signed the Declaration of Independence, and were the best spirits the God of heaven could find on the face of the earth to perform this work. Martin Luther and John Wesley helped to release the people from religious bondage that held them during the Dark Ages. They also prepared the people's hearts so they would be ready to receive the restored gospel when the Lord sent it again to men on the earth." In the General Conference of the Church, held in April 1898, Woodruff announced to the church members that the work had been done. He said, "I am going to bear my testimony to this assembly, if I never do it again in my life, that those men who laid the foundation of this American government and signed the Declaration of Independence were the best spirits the God of heaven could find on the face of the earth. They were choice spirits, not wicked men. General Washington and all the men that labored for the purpose were inspired of the Lord." Another thing I am going to say here, because I have a right to say it. Every one of those men that signed the Declaration of Independence, with General Washington, called upon me, as an apostle of the Lord Jesus Christ, in the temple at St. George, 2 consecutive nights, and demanded at my hands that I should go forth and attend to the ordinances of the house of God for them. Men are here, I believe, that know of this. Brother John McAllister, David H. Cannon and James S. Bleak. Brother McAllister baptized me for all those men, and then I told these brethren that it was their duty to go into the temple and labor, until they had got endowments for all of them. They did it. Would those spirits have called up on me, as an elder in Israel, to perform that work? If they had not been noble spirits before God, they would not. Here is a list of names of those who had temple work done for them by Wilford Woodruff. Founding Fathers: William Hooper, Joseph Hughes, John Penn, Button Gwinnett, Lyman Hull, George Walton, Edward Rutledge, Thomas Hayward Jr., Thomas Lynch, Arthur Middleton, Samuel Chase, William Paca, Thomas Stone, Charles Carroll, George Wythe, Richard Henty Lee, Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Harrison, Thomas Nelson Jr., Francis Lightfoot Lee, Carter Braxton, Robert Morris, Benjamin Rush, Benjamin Franklin, John Morton, George Clymer, James Smith, George Taylor, James Wilson, George Ross, Cesar Rodney, George Reed, Thomas McKean, Philip Livingston, Francis Lewis, Lewis Morris, Richard Stockton, John Witherspoon, Francis Hopkinson, John Hart, Abraham Clark, Josiah Bartlett, William Whipple, Matthew Thornton, Samuel Adams, John Adams, Robert Treat Payne, Elbridge Gertie, Stephen Hopkins, William Mallory, Roger Sherman, Samuel Huntington, William Williams, and Oliver Walcott. The temple work for John Hancock and William Floyd had been done previously. Presidents of the United States: George Washington, John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, James Monroe, John Quincy Adams, Andrew Jackson, William Henry Harrison, John Tyler, James Knox Polk, Zachary Taylor, Millard Fillmore, Franklin Pierce, Abraham Lincoln, and Andrew Johnson. Temple work was not done for James Buchanan, Martin Van Buren, or Ulysses S. Grant. Other important men in history who were baptized by Wilford Woodruff in the St. George, Utah Temple in August 1877 include Sir Edward Gibbon, Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, Oliver Goldsmith, Henry Grattan Humboldt, Alexander von Irving, Washington Jackson, Thomas Jonathan Stonewall Johnson, Samuel Juarez, Benito Pablo Kemble, John Philip Liebig, Baron Justice von Livingstone, David Macaulay, Thomas Babington Nelson, Lord Horatio O'Connell, Daniel Peabody, George Powers, Hiram Reynolds, Sir Joshua Schiller, Johann Christoph Friedrich von Scott, Sir Walter Seward, William Henry Stephenson, George Thackeray, William Makepeace, Vespucci, Amerigo Webster, Daniel Wesley, John Wordsworth, William Perpa, Count Demetrius, John Washington, Sir Henry Washington, Lawrence Washington, Augustine Washington, Lawrence Washington, Daniel Parke Custis, John Parke Custis, and Martin Luther. Important women in history who had their temple work done in the St. George Temple include Jean Armour of Scotland, Jean Armour Burns, Jane Austen of England, novelist, Mary Ball of America, Mary Ball Washington, Sarah Bernard of England, Sarah Barnard Faraday, wife of Michael Faraday, Charlotte Bronte of England, novelist, Felicia Dorothea Brown of England, Elizabeth Barrett Browning of England, poet, Martha Caldwell Calhoun d. 1802 of America, Martha Parke Custis of America, Martha Dandridge Washington of America, Rachel Donaldson Jackson of America, wife of Andrew Jackson, and Abigail Eastman Webster of America, mother of Daniel Webster, to name but a few. Temple work was performed for a total of 70 eminent women.